Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. We are definitely back. It's been a little bit, even though I know it's been one extra day since the last time we did a live discussion, but good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for taking some time out of your Tuesday night. It is August 20th, 2024, and we're here to talk tropics, do another tropical update because we don't have anything pressing on the horizon. I'm going to get that out there into open air right now because I'm noticing that the tropical meteorology out there, the tropical community, if you will, is starting to go wide right, and they're starting to go wide left. We don't have any more middle ground at this point, it feels like. We have just folks who are ready to cancel the season, and then we have folks who are ready for some explosive development. We are going to continue to walk that fine line right down the middle. We're going to continue to play that devil's advocate role, and we're going to play it fairly well while looking at all the pieces of the puzzle as to why we haven't seen development just yet, and why we will inevitably get development as we get towards the tail end of this month and through the Labor Day holiday. I'm confident at this point we will have something to talk about, something more concrete than long-range model data. So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to see that the chat is popping off tonight. It's nice to see everybody again. It feels like it's been so long, even though it's been 24 hours. I have notes. Give me just less than 30 seconds. I'm going to talk into the mic and sneak back behind you guys so I can get my notebook here. So we got a pretty decent itinerary to talk about tonight. And first and foremost, I want to discuss a couple of things that have really just been off the chain in the weather community, to tell you the truth. It's been rough out there. But first, welcome everybody out there. It's great to see everyone once again. If you wouldn't mind nudging that like button, consider clicking subscribe if you're brand new to the channel, or especially after the fact if you're watching later in time. Please consider joining us as we get ready to make some transformations here on the channel, as well as take big leaps in time as we go into the month of September. But we'd also love to have you along for the community here as well, as we continue to grow and hopefully prosper as we go through the peak of the hurricane season. So first and foremost, I've been watching a lot of videos as we've gone over the last couple of days, especially yesterday. I took a bit of a hiatus because we were recovering from a very busy weekend, and I mean very busy. It was extremely busy. That's why, if you guys noticed, it took me so long to get to your comments from Friday's live stream, and I do apologize for that, but I'm fairly certain I've answered everybody up to this point. So before we get into the brief, I want to discuss something right out of the gate. Hyperactive, because I think, truthfully, the reason why we are seeing almost what looks like political extremism. I know obviously this is for weather, meteorology. I'm not going politics, but I'm using that as an example. We're almost seeing what looks reminiscent of political extremism in the tropics nowadays. We have our folks on the right-hand side who are like, nope, season's done, the forecasts are garbage, nothing's going to happen, you guys blew it. Then we have on the left-hand side of the screen, or the left-hand side of the community, where people are saying it's imminent, it's going to go off like a bomb, and things are going to get really bad, get ready. And as a result, it's creating almost division. It's kind of a bummer, because I feel as if during these weird periods of time to where we're putting our heads together, trying to figure out what's going on and to come up with a clear path ahead, we should be coming together, putting all the big brains together and collaborating, within arm's reach of one another, as opposed to trying to divide one another, because it doesn't do any favors for you guys out there. It clouds the image. So the reason we're starting this briefing off, and please rock with me, guys, we're going to talk tropics, I promise. There's just something I really want to get off my chest, and I assume, and I'm going to rightfully assume, I speak for a lot of genuine tropical meteorologists out there when I go on this bit of a tangent. Hyperactive, what does it really mean? So hyperactive comes in all shapes and sizes. Hyperactive is not just named storms. Hyperactive has nothing to do with how many named storms you can put on a chart. That is not hyperactive. And unfortunately, I wholeheartedly believe at this point in time, there have been so many unofficial sources, folks who are not degreed meteorologists, folks who aren't working for an official office, folks not affiliated with National Hurricane Center. There are so many others out there who are taking that word and stretching it out as far as they can and using it for every bit of hyperbole that they possibly can. This is forming hyperactively. Lots of storms showing us hyperactivity here. There's no hyperactivity right now because there aren't any named storms. That's not hyperactivity, and we have completely convoluted the way that is meant to describe a hurricane season. First of all, named storms, ACE beyond 60 west, number of days, number of impacts, costs to property, fatalities, etc. All those are different variables that go into the term hyperactive. And unfortunately, right now, I think the general consensus is, folks, look at the analogs. That's another thing I want to touch on as well, analogs. People look at hyperactive and they think we should have a named storm on the chart at every point in time. If we don't have a named storm, then something's wrong, and that is far from the truth. And it's a shame that that word has been so muddied up over the last month and a half, 2 months, even before the hurricane season. I remember April and May, we had all those preseason videos talking hyperactive, hyperactive, hyperactive. We've said it so many different times, I'm personally even tired of it, which is why I tend to stay away from it. Another thing, analog. Analogs are charts, history, climate data, seasonal information, observations that we have on tap that could provide us a bit of an idea, a landscape, if you will, like a canvas, pre-painted image of where we can start to draw our current hurricane season. That's another thing I think that we've really neglected to explain to a lot of people. Our analogs are not meant to be used in the sense of, oh my goodness, it's going to replicate this season. 2020 is an analog. We're done for. No, 2020 is an analog because we had the ENSO phase. We had general steering currents. We had source regions. We had different patterns during intermittent parts of the season. 2005 is an analog. That means Katrina 2.0 is inevitable. No, that's not what we're saying. Analogs are called analogs because for long-term, long-range forecasting, when we can't trust the models, when we don't have reliable data to look out beyond 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we can go back to those seasons that have very similar ingredients and backgrounds as this hurricane season and help us make a determination through pattern recognition. So that's what an analog is. Hyperactivity is a very, very vast term that has been so badly twisted this hurricane season because of the very hot waters, the ocean heat content. We were imagining, I think we've almost unintentionally created this imaginary hyperactive season in our minds to where we should already be 40 storms deep, and because we're only 5 deep, we're wrong. Everyone's wrong. And that's another thing, too, is I stand on a very tall pedestal and defend our NOAA folks, our CSU folks, all of our TSR representatives, Penn State, MSU, U of A, whoever came out with legitimate tropical forecasts. We have to give them credit. They have far more knowledge in the field than any of us do, myself included. I'm willing to put myself out there and say I study a lot, I've worked hard, I'm still learning, but they are the true, genuine subject matter experts. They're not YouTubers out there who want to gain clout and notoriety. So when they put these forecasts out, they understand that their professional career is on the line. They're not going to issue it just for the sake of hyping everybody up. Dare I say the other H word that gives me a weird tingle. So anyways, another piece of information that I did some digging on today just to give you guys a little bit of insight for those of you who will not be swayed from the right hand of the spectrum, the season's over. For those of you who want to draw comparisons, I did some background research on some statistics, just some very simple statistics to hopefully put some stuff into perspective, and then I promise we'll move on, so just hang on with me for another minute or two. For example, 2023. A lot of folks consider 2023 a bit of a hype season, a bust season, but we had a lot of named storms. So wouldn't that be considered hyperactive? In 2023, the entirety of the hurricane season produced $3 to $4.2 billion in damage from start to the last storm just before Halloween. October 28th, I believe it was, in 2023 was the last named storm out there that came through. It was Tammy. I remember covering Tammy very closely. And dare I say, 2023 unfortunately produced 20 total fatalities from start to finish. Today is August 20th, 2024, and to date, 2024 has produced $9 billion of total damage up to this point. in a span of only 2 to 3 months, and we already have 88 total fatalities. So if you guys want to say this season's a bust, there's 88 people who are no longer with us, and we've nearly doubled the amount of property damage out there for folks in the Caribbean, for folks in Bermuda, folks up there in Atlantic Canada, and for those of us here in the state of Florida, the Carolinas, Texas, Mexico, Yucatan, Jamaica, Cayman Islands, Hispaniola, Puerto Rico. Unfortunately, there's already 88 total fatalities, and we are not done with the season yet. And we've already surpassed 2023, so shouldn't 2023, based on what we've done to manipulate the term hyperactive, technically be considered hyperactive? You be the judge. Folks will come after us and say, we haven't had the named storm, so it's not hyperactive. You flip the script and you look at 2023, we had 20 named storms. We busted all of our forecasts. We were high. Everyone was forecasting a very dead season last year, and we exceeded that. But yet, no one wants to say it was hyperactive. Now, this hurricane season comes with the classification of potential hyperactivity. We've already exceeded the criteria that we met last year. Last year, we had 3 impacts. We already have 5. We have 5 named storms, 5 impacts. We had 20 named storms, only 3 impacts. Roll the math around in your mind, folks. But anyways, let's get moving. Let's get on with the rest of the brief. Just wanted to hopefully put some stuff into perspective and break down some misnomers. There have been a lot of weird videos, and I'm kind of tired of it personally. To be a little more candid with you guys, I'm a little sick of it. We got to stop throwing these terms around if we really don't know what we're talking about. It's going to confuse you guys. It's going to confuse other weather sources. Other weather sources who may not know as much are going to look to other sources and think, wow, that's how they describe it, so I'm going to go ahead and describe it the same way. It's a very twisted game of telephone where you whisper in one person's ear and then the message gets garbled as it gets closer and closer to its end result, and that's you guys. So, all right, here we go. So where we stand right now, we have another deep trough out over the eastern United States with an upper low drifting south out of Quebec into New York State, Pennsylvania, and the rest of the northeast United States with some thunderstorm activity extending up into Atlantic Canada. This is what's left of post-tropical Ernesto right up here, screaming towards the European continent at this point, getting closer and closer to the British Isles up there as it races off towards the east, almost due east at this point, caught with our jet stream. And what's very interesting, to tell you the truth, which just adds a bit of oddity to this hurricane season, is earlier throughout the day today, PM and I were shooting each other messages on X, and we were talking about the heavy rain, the Swiss statements, the special weather statements, the thunderstorms that were ripping through West Florida and then got to my area in Central Florida. And then I looked outside after clocking out of work, and I'm like, is it winter time already? What is going on out there? It looks like a cold front just passed through. The skies were clear. The sun was bright. I was asking myself, why is it so bright outside? But yeah, we had another trough and a really decent frontal boundary come through, a dry front, not as much of a cool front, come through and is now working its way through Central Florida, producing some thunderstorms still in the southern 1/3 of the peninsula at this point, into the Bahamas, parts of Cuba, the Isles just to the south of Cuba. Jamaica saw some orographic-induced thunderstorms with this feature as well. And then the rest of Central America is still being buffeted by the monsoonal trough attached to our Pacific intertropical convergence zone extending through the equatorial regions of the Pacific, as well as some vorticity being spawned up from Colombia, Venezuela, and the southernmost periphery of Central America. So thunderstorms are the name of the game. Moisture is still readily apparent in the Gulf and in the Caribbean, but we do still have our dry continental air coming off of Europe and Northern Africa, moving into the Atlantic MDR, which is helping to continually suppress our tropical waves. We do have indications that this is going to end soon, and I'm glad that CSU reviewed and released their latest 2-week forecast, because it essentially confirmed what a lot of us were sniffing around in the background between content and talking and posts, etc. The MJO is in a very weird state right now. It collapsed, got excited, collapsed, got excited. Then we had Debbie that just crawled its way up the east coast of the United States that pulled us in to this pseudo fall time pattern. Now we have Ernesto that's more or less done the same thing, because we had hangover effects, if you will, from Debbie. So that's why we have another trough extending down the east coast of the United States with that cool air being funneled in association with the jet stream that's pretty much centered almost right over top the southeast at this point. If you look at our ridging up in through the international border of Canada and the United States, then back down through the Great Lakes, the Midwest. Our jet stream, our polar front jet, is actually running through the Carolinas, maybe parts of northern Georgia and Tennessee, which is fairly erroneous for this point in the summertime season. We typically don't see these deep style of troughs, and that is definitely influenced by the very deep low pressure systems we had scrape through like this, and then another one that followed more or less the same pattern. And if you remember when we talked about it, thinking about it from a fluid perspective, as those winds rotate around the storm in cyclonic fashion, you're going to be pulling all that cool air that's normally just situated up there doing nothing over Canada down towards the south. And then all that warm air associated with our tropical cyclone and out over the equatorial regions on the right-hand side of the system is just going to go up like so. And as you can see, what goes up has to come down. It's going to flip-flop, and that's what helps to amplify the pattern north to south. That's why we're in such a meridional flow right now. Meridional being those high and low wavelengths I'd shown you guys before. This is our jet right now, coming up and then down, going up and then down. That's meridional. That's why everything's kind of dorked up. Once we get back to a little bit lesser amplitude and we get to more of, like, I guess you can say, less seismic activity on your seismometer, instead of the needle going like this, it's going to be smoothed out. We're not going to have all that activity. Then things will get a little more readily apparent for us on our models. We're back to the classic no tropical cyclone activity detected or expected over the next 7 days. Again, Ernesto is gone. A quick glance in the Eastern Pacific, and they're starting to see some action out there. We have two areas of interest out here. One is getting ready to develop right now. We've gone and rotated the cycle through into their next EP 90/91 invest area. We have Tropical Storm Gilma. Very weird. I want to say Velma from Scooby-Doo, but it's Gilma out there as well, moving off towards the west at 10 knots, 12 miles an hour with max sustained winds of 70 miles an hour, expected to become a hurricane here very soon. Just for shoots and giggles, I'll pull up this chart just to say we're talking about a tropical cyclone, and we'll move on from there. So here is our latest global tropics hazards outlook. I finally figured out how to pull this bad boy up and have it close up, zoomed in like this, so we're not squinting looking at the charts, especially from you guys watching on your cellular devices. This is what we have valid for the 28th through September 3rd of 2024, right up to not only the fateful change that's coming to this channel, but also the Labor Day holiday, which unfortunately, Labor Day is fairly synonymous with significant hurricane activity through the last several decades. We've been tracking those bad boys. You can see that CPC holds us steady for a greater than 60% chance of TC development out there, TCG, Tropical Cyclogenesis, for the MDR headed towards the Leeward Islands, the Lesser Antilles. There is an extension of that from September 4th through September 10th, albeit we go down to that 40-plus percentile bracket. Still something to keep an eye on. I do think that whatever occurs between the 25th, I'm saying the 25th is when our signal is, I'm expecting it anyways, to continue to go up like it did last night into today. It's been very wishy-washy, particularly on the ensembles, but we're going to continue to watch it as we go hour by hour, day by day. By the time we get to August 28th, I really do think we're going to see something splash down, and we'll be able to track it, and that could possibly be our Francine. Then just beyond that, we will remain in somewhat of an unfavorable setup for the MJO, or upper-level atmospheric forcing, and then we'll make a return as we get into the middle parts of September, unless we get some CCKW, or Kelvin waves, move through the pattern to help stir everything up. I haven't really looked at that, to tell you the truth. I've been obsessing about this weird background state to put something together for you guys. And so that's going to be something I'm going to be digging into over the next 48 hours until our next live stream. But all in all, promising signals out there. We still have our dry wave up there near Cuba, Hispaniola, the Bahamas. I was going to say the Dominicans. The Bahamas and the Dominican Republic and so on. That's not expected to do very much. And then you can see we have another area of potential interest as it wanders its way through the Lesser Antilles, up towards Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, the Bahamas, Cuba, Jamaica. That kind of fades away ever so slightly before getting a bit bifurcation in the track here. You can see up through there and up through there. And then we have our next couple of features coming off of Africa with some fairly decent signals. I wouldn't say this is an extremely confident signal. I would say this is just a wonderful piece for us to know, okay, we got to be watching the MDR as well as what we have running through the Caribbean. And we had a very weird 0 and 6Z GFS BOC hurricane that popped up. Not putting a lot of faith in that, but it is interesting to see that our probabilities, our blend of probabilities on the Euro 12Z run also indicates that area is maybe a little area to pay close attention to, keep an eye open on it. If we switch on over to our European ensembles from 12Z today, obviously not a remarkable signal. We're not thinking that anything is imminently on the horizon. Some folks got that misconstrued in my last video. I'm not too sure how. The thumbnail was considered clickbait, alarming. Still not too sure how. I wasn't saying there was going to be imminent development. I wasn't saying massive development. I was just saying, hey, our waves are going to be switching back down to a more favorable pattern, a more favorable tempo, and we're going to have to monitor them as they move off towards the west. Where's the lie? But anyways, you can see here from 12 Zulu today, moving through the Lesser Antilles. I'm probably going to say that until the end of this hurricane season. The Lesser Antilles are going to need to watch this, as well as all of our folks in the East and Central Caribbean. It does seem like if there is going to be tropical development over the next 10 to 14 days, it will occur in our favorite area from about 60-ish west, maybe 50-ish west, all the way to 70 west, moving off towards the west-northwest with a few stronger iterations trying to pass to the north of our islands. We shall see. We're not going to make a determination on our forward track at this point. We're mainly just watching for our developmental source region. We're going to have more robust waves coming off very soon. We're almost done with this weird climatological phase of turning our hurricane season into this weird topsy-turvy state, and then we'll go from there. The GFS has actually perked up quite a bit over the last 24 hours from 0Z up until 12 Zulu. We'll take a look at 18Z here momentarily once that continues to populate. And you can see the same general thinking. You can spot the ridge a mile away. You can draw the ridge in if you wanted to right there. Nice prominent anticyclone, high height center, high pressure, however you want to describe it, right over the centralmost northern Atlantic Ocean, driving our systems off towards the west-northwest with a few members trying to get into the Gulf, trying to head up towards the southeast, but obviously that is going to be a solid 10 to 14 days away, so we're just keeping our eyes open. We're not too concerned at this point in time. My main focal point is going to be the Lesser Antilles as these features come off into a bit better of an overall environment, and then we will start to see whether or not they get their act together as they're within their final approach, like we saw with Debbie, with Ernesto, with Beryl, all the systems as they started to develop their convection and finally get their bones, their inner structure, if you will, as it moved towards the Caribbean. Here's a quick glance at the long-range European model. The EPs there on Weather Nerds only go out so far. This is a better long-range look, and you can see a fairly decent look. It's a mixed bag of sorts, which if you look at the timestamp, this is immediately after Labor Day. This is 4 September, so this is Wednesday, 2 Wednesdays from now, not this Wednesday, tomorrow, not next Wednesday, but the following. We'd been discussing, guys, that August was going to be the month where we could see stuff for the Southeast and the Caribbean, and then September was going to be a mixed bag. If you guys recall, looking back at old live streams, preseason, early season, I'd always mention to you guys that September and October are going to be a very weird mixed bag of things. And I will be danged, for lack of a better term, if that forecast verifies as well. We're already in a bit of a mixed bag setup right now with a very anomalous situation in terms of why things are not developing as fast as everyone was anticipating, if there's going to be latent development, if things are going to go gangbusters as we go through the month of September. It's still too early to say, but we have a promising signal here, and I'm not liking some of these, as we like to call weenie members out here, going full-on Cat 4, if not stronger, as they're moving through the Bahamas into the Gulf of Mexico, with a few taking some reminiscent tracks to some famous hurricanes we've seen back in the day. And obviously, guys, this is going to change. Naturally, don't pay too close attention to the individual ensembles. We're just noting the general intensity and the direction, and the general direction is going to be off towards the west-northwest with a couple of outliers. These could be later waves trying to escape up to the north. Generally speaking, whenever we have a freight train of waves coming off like so, you're going to have, like I've already mentioned, a bit of mixed bag effects. You're going to have one going this way, one going this way, one going this way, one going that way. It's just kind of the nature of the beast with the tropics. So when one goes up, one has to come back through. Here's a look at our long-range GEFS with the GEFS ensembles actually showing the exact same thing. Bit of a mixed bag. First couple of waves coming off towards the west, a little bit more potentially impactful if they do get going, and then others further upstream escaping up towards the north, and the weakness likely provided by these systems if they were to deepen down. Not nearly as robust of a signal as the European model. The Euro had, like I mentioned, a lot of 950 to 959 and then sub 950 millibar ensemble solutions, individual solutions solutions, I should say, moving through the Caribbean into the southeast. Not as bad, although I'm not liking this random Charlie 2.0, Ian 2.0 straight into the Bay of Tampa for the Labor Day holiday right there. You can see a sub 950, or no, a 959 to 950 millibar ensemble solution kicking up into the west coast of Florida. So again, not looking at the individual members here, we're looking at the general flow of our ensembles, and that appears to still be the prevailing track tendency that we're going to be monitoring. We had mentioned this would be the case for August, and early September looks to be much of the same until things can really get going. And you know, guys, to tell you the truth, I was getting a little impatient, but at this point, going through the emotional roller coaster of analyzing the models, looking at analysis data, analyzing the models, looking at analysis data, I'm ready. I'm just riding it out at this point. I'm riding the wave of going into the tropics, the peak of the hurricane season, and we shall see what actually happens. But we're definitely seeing more confidence signals going up and up. And while we're on this page, let's go ahead and switch on over to the 18Z GFS and see what we have. Here are 18Z ensembles. Let's see what we've got out there on the board. There goes our first area of potential development occurring somewhere between, that's fairly early in the run, between 160 to 180 hours out. We start to see some stuff perking up in the MDR, moving off towards the west-northwest, and then things get a little more excited, and there's that mixed bag look once again. I would rather look at the actual spaghetti plots, because right here, this just looks like a bunch of aliens flying saucers towards the United States and the Caribbean, but essentially each of these individual rings here, these little pizzas, if you want to call them that, are going to be pressure centers, and the deeper the colors get towards the center, like this one is easily major hurricane, this is possibly major hurricane, that's possibly major hurricane. These ones with the blues in the center, those are probably hurricanes, the darker blues, major hurricanes, and then these weaker ones, just areas of general low pressure, tropical storms maybe. But you can see, again, the general prevailing pattern is going to be that mixed bag scenario with our multiple waves coming off. I did notice something here earlier when I was pulling this stuff up for the briefing. I hadn't looked too closely at our control members of the European model, and I noticed something very peculiar about the 850 control from the 12Z Euro. And if you go through time, not only am I watching very closely what I briefed you guys before with our Pancake Ridge driving our winds due out of the east, driving these waves off towards the west until they get somewhere around this general area. That's not what I was paying too much attention to. If you watch as you go through the loop, there goes that first system. There's our first wave. So the Euro does showing it develop into something fairly weak as it moves through the Caribbean, deepening just to the south of Hispaniola and Puerto Rico. You know, obviously this is fairly ways out. This is a little beyond 200 hours. It shows potential organization of our feature as it's on approach. Just like we had said, you know, approaching the Lesser Antilles between the 160 to 180 hour mark. Then it kind of tries to get its act together a little bit more. It gets pummeled by the islands and pulls up over the state of Florida and right up the east coast, if you will. And then if you look, don't look now, but what I also found interesting is there's something else right there on the 12Z European ensemble control member. What's that, as Chief Meteorologist Tom Sorrells used to say way back in the day? What's that? You can see that not only do we have this feature, whatever this may be, moving up on this run of the EPS, but then we have a second one just beyond the time frame, or just as we cross into September, and that's another one that looks to be a bit more formidable as it moves through the Lesser Antilles. So if you're not picking up what I've been putting down already, the Lesser Antilles are the ones that really do need to be very mindful as we go through the rest of the season. You know, we're going to have systems that will miss you guys. We will probably have systems that don't develop until beyond you guys. But so far, every single one of our systems that have done something this hurricane season have more or less played a role on the Lesser Antilles. Chris definitely did, because it came through as a wave. I guess you could say Alberto technically really didn't play a direct role, because it was that broad gyre circulation slinging moisture around until finally some vorticity broke away and developed in the Bay of Campeche. Marcus Coleman, absolutely. I definitely think Florida should still be paying close attention to that. If you look at the ensembles here, most definitely they're coming in our general direction. Not anticipating a landfall because we don't have anything on the board just yet. We don't have anything promising, but we should absolutely be monitoring these signals for certain. I mean, if you look at even our 18 Zulu GFS, a couple of those ensembles take it right through Florida. A few of them, a nice little handful, nice little chunk, either the Panhandle or Central Florida. So we're definitely not out of the woods just yet, and September, October could be very interesting if this is a backloaded season. Even if we're talking another 2 to 4 storms out there, we have a lot of leftover heat and energy for these systems to pass or chap into, and if they do make it far enough west, I would anticipate they're going to take full advantage of that. Here's a look at our Saharan dust, so you can kind of more or less see why it is that the MDR is still fairly quiet. We have all that Saharan dust as well as the dry continental air mass being funneled off of Europe. It's a little hard to see on this map because obviously all we see is the Portugal area of Spain and then a little sliver of Spain right there. But if you imagine the general wind flow with that anticyclone being bullied up against this general area, you look at the winds hypothetically flowing in a clockwise fashion around it, coupled with our screaming easterly jet, that is a perfect scenario for dry, dusty air to just continue to engulf the MDR. And then because our African monsoon has nudged our ITCZ up towards the north ever so slightly, it puts our tropical waves right into all that air, all that dusty air. But towards the back end, even our NASA model is seeing that the dust is going to ebb and flow pretty spectacularly. And look at that giant spin that forms up as well on the dust model. Look at that. Moving right over the Cape Verde Islands right there. Big old counterclockwise spin that just moves off towards the west with a little bit of a notable spin out towards this general area. But obviously, we're not looking at this model for spin. We're looking at this model for dust. Do you think there will be another Cat 5 that's doable, but not the most likely outcome at this time? But an excellent question, Roxanne. It's definitely doable. Naz, can you give a little ENSO update? Yeah, I will edit that. Absolutely. Thanks for tuning in, as a matter of fact. So I actually have seen a couple of sources out there mentioning that we have hit La Nina, but I'm not seeing that just yet. I don't see anything in our relative ENSO oscillation index or the RONI, the ONI, and I don't see it on our tropical tidbits buoy data or our anomaly data out there either. I still think we're working our way through a cool neutral pattern. We haven't seen La Nina fully head on just yet, but I really do think by the end of September, if not October, we will probably end up seeing it really sneak in, and that's really going to set us up for an interesting fall and winter time as we go through December and January. Stephen Myrick, I'm calling you out. Pretty much everything you and the rest has been wrong on everything. No dust and favorable conditions, and most would be blocked and going into the Gulf. Absolutely pitiful. I'm not sure I understand the second half of your message. No dust and favorable conditions, and most would be blocked going into the Gulf. That doesn't sound... I think you might have the wrong channel there, to tell you the truth, because actually we even verified this month our forecast from back at the beginning of this year in terms of Florida getting hit by a hurricane in the month of August. So I'm not sure. I really can't interpret the second half of your message either. Period. No dust and favorable conditions, and most would be blocked and from going into the Gulf? Get back to me on that, but truthfully, in terms of what we've predicted on here, we've actually been doing fairly decent for ourselves, truthfully. Can we look at the favorable, unfavorable charts and compare different versions, compare what different versions are suggesting? Sure, we'll get onto that here towards the very end. I also wanted to show you this. So this is going to be our integrated vapor transport over Africa. And I just want to show you guys that right now we still have some higher latitude waves coming off north. If you look, this is 15 north right there. So the still fairly high latitude. This would be 20, somewhere in that general area where I have my other yellow line drawn. And if you look, the next couple of waves are going to come off fairly high latitude, but then check these guys out. Some very, very, very aggressive looking tropical waves coming off, especially towards the very tail end of the run, for sure. I thought this was fairly interesting. Obviously, it doesn't tell us that we're going to for sure get development, but if you kind of extrapolate the time frame out, looking at our long-range ensembles, and you time step this forward figuratively using your imagination, if you will, this lines up pretty decently with what our long-range ensembles are trying to hint towards for very late August, the last couple of days, and then early September. So, still just following the breadcrumbs, lots to watch. These are some fairly impressive tropical waves, though. This is, again, the vapor transport here, and essentially what that means is we're just moving water in the atmosphere, deep layer water at multiple levels. This is from the surface all the way up to 200 millibars. So this is the entire column of the atmosphere from where we are all the way up to the top where we observe weather. Highest most in the atmosphere that weather actually exists. And you could see we have some pretty decent looking waves that are going to be coming off here very soon. You can see the same thing on our precipitable water. Some of the initial waves coming off don't look as robust, but then as you go towards the very tail end of the run, this is our 18 Zulu, so you can't see as far out. If I go to 12Z though, and you finish the rest of the loop, you can see our waves are really going to start looking fairly clustered up right there. Very consolidated look to our tropical waves, and they're going to try to work their way off at a bit closer to 15 degrees latitude as opposed to above 20 degrees latitude. So that's also going to play a role in whether or not these things get going or not. So we shall see. Anyways, let's go over to our favorable and unfavorable maps real quick, since that's pretty much everything I have for you guys. Let's take a look at the European AI model real quick, just for the fun of it, because this one has also been very, what's the word I'm looking for, adamant in terms of developing something. This is 12 Zulu. Yeah, look at that. There's 12Z. So the Euro AI model continues to want to develop something out there, moving through our Greater Antilles. Labor Day, just after Labor Day. This is September 4th. Lines up with our ensembles fairly well once again. Let's go over to our latest 200 millibar potential velocity anomaly. And this is kind of what I'd mentioned to you guys a while ago. If you recall, and we've also been speculating about that behind the scenes too, is sometimes too good of a good thing can become a bad thing. And right now we have our MJO positioned almost right over top the Eastern MDR, Africa, and the Indian Peninsula, or the Indian Peninsula, the Indian Ocean. And so we're seeing very, very, very aggressive easterly flow off the continent of Africa. If you look at the control member here, we have very, very strong upward vertical velocities over the entirety of Africa, into Middle East, and into India, even over Europe for all intents and purposes, which is really cranking up our easterly jet, which is also likely the reason why we're seeing some of our waves, if not most of our waves, getting ripped apart. Then if you go past day 10, day 15, day 20, we finally start to see that moving a little bit further towards the maritime continents and India specifically, which should relax that vertical wind shear just enough to get us really going. And then by mid-September, I would imagine we're going to be off to the races, and we're finally going to start to see more consecutive signals that we're very familiar with the hurricane season. So this could potentially be a fairly backloaded season, a very steady trickle, one storm here, one storm there, one storm there, and so on. And then finally, as we get beyond the actual peak of the hurricane season, today was the official bell ring. I want to give it 5 to 7 more days to see if anything is going to happen for the month of August before we go ruling August out as Ernesto, and that's it. And then we'll see what September brings. But so far, if this holds in terms of our MJO propagation brought to us by the European model, this should get our hurricane season moving, and we should start to see a bit more consecutive waves coming off that have the opportunity to actually do something with themselves versus just elongating and disappearing like some of our GIFs out there, where they just fade out into existence. I heard there is cooling in the Atlantic. Is that true? No, not right now. The only area of cooling that we've technically realized has been just upstream of where Ernesto propagated. We're finally seeing our upwelled waters to the south of Bermuda, very thin channel, very similar to what the, what Franklin did last year, if you guys remember. Franklin left that very thin band of blues in the anomaly charts up there just to the south and west of Bermuda last year, so very similar fashion. Clara, hello there. I would, honestly. I don't have a bell to tell you the truth. But to answer your question, no, there really hasn't been any substantial cooling across the Atlantic basin. The subtropics are fairly hot. The Atlantic is fairly hot. We know that the Gulf of Mexico is essentially bubbling. Could Hurricane Matthew 2.0 be possible? It is always possible. I like to fall back on the statement, and it may sound like a bit of a cop-out, but I like to fall back on the statement of, it's a possible solution, but is it the most likely outcome? Not right now. Mr. Snow Gaming, they do. However, again, doable solution, but not the most likely outcome. And guys, when I say it's a doable solution, what I mean is we do have the setup to permit something like that happening, a Boston area impact like Sandy did a number of years ago. Yes, but is it the most likely outcome right now? No, because we don't really see anything on the horizon. So don't take that as I'm dispelling you or doing full weatherman, just kind of yes, maybe, possibly, could, you never know. Like, that's not what I'm saying. It's just, yes, the pattern would suggest that if there was a tropical cyclone on the board, that would be an issue. But is it the most likely outcome right now? No, not right now. Other YouTubers are saying that this is going to be a very quiet in September. Do you agree? I don't. Claire, I don't. And that kind of goes back to the very beginning of my spiel tonight. I'm very tired. It's honestly more draining to hear all this conflict going on between the weather community as opposed to the tropics. So you would think that with such weird cities, conditions, trying to get the message across to you guys would be pulling together to communicate the more accurate representation as opposed to creating cliques and groups, gangs, etc. Naz, anything about development from the front that passed by or just a rainmaker for y'all? Local Mets said we may have to monitor the Gulf. We do have to monitor, but I don't see anything extremely alarming. If we do get a very rogue spin, it's going to just be a weak area of low pressure right now. I didn't see anything in the ensembles just now as we were going through them, and I think only the icon had really brought together an area of low pressure. The GFS spins up a low pressure area, but that looks to be a bit more of a stable wave forming right on that frontal line. That would be non-tropical. It would definitely, like you said, be a rainmaker. How's Turks and Caicos looking for the Labor Day? Traveling Tony, good question. So right now, looking okay, but there are things that need to be monitored. There is something that could be in your neck of the woods, as we just saw, for example, on the AI model, right around the September 4th time frame. So I know that's the day after, but in that same general ballpark. Claire, no, absolutely. Yeah, I don't care about clicks. I really don't. They're nice. Don't get me wrong. That means I'm interacting and reaching more people. That's for sure. But I don't do this channel for clicks at all whatsoever. And I know that's the cliche statement. Nobody's out there trying to do it for clicks. When we know dang well that at the end of the day, we're on YouTube for the clicks. Like, yes, I like the clicks. I love interacting with you guys, but that's not why I created this channel. Far from it. And honestly, with what's coming in September, this channel is going to change a lot. And if you guys don't believe me, that's going to be the nail in the coffin to show you, wow, yeah, this dude really just enjoyed and loved his community, because I'm going to take a lot of you guys with me. Lord willing, anyways. AI model has been doing pretty good. Yes, I think it has. Based on the few storms that we've had and the adjustments that it's made, I would definitely think it's been doing fairly well for itself. Gregory Goodman, Alabama will most definitely need to be watching for sure. As we just saw in the ensembles, we are not out of the woods for seeing a southeast United States landfall from, from Louisiana through to the Carolinas, and anywhere in between we could still see something if they get far enough into the Caribbean and try to spin up and cause trouble. But yeah, that's kind of about it, guys. That's all we've got right now. We're kind of just doing an update on our slow and very steady. We're not looking at anything of a landslide or anything in the nature of a landslide. But slowly but surely, we now have the full 18Z GEFS model run right here. And you can see, yeah, look at that. I mean, at the very end of the run on the 5th, you can just kind of make the determination for yourself. There's lots of little flying saucers over Florida, over Alabama, ironically right there, Gregory, shout out to you. We have also our East Coast ensemble members. This is honestly what I want to say the September and October timeframe is going to look like. It's going to definitely be a very mixed bag area across the United States. We're going to have some storms that go up and down. Not every single storm is going to hit somebody, Lord willing. And then we are going to have some that are going to pose a potential threat not only to our Caribbean friends, but our folks in Central America, Mexico, and the Gulf Coast United States, for sure. I really do think so. And even if it's not gangbusters to where we're tracking 4 named storms, F, G, H, I at the same time, we're definitely going to be tracking storms through September. I highly doubt. In fact, I'm 100% certain, truthfully, that we're going to stop at Ernesto. There's no way. So guys, if you want to, I'll go ahead and I'll level with you for a little bit. If you don't want to buy into the 20 named storms, the 200 plus ace, blase, blah, 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 all the H active wordage out there and all the synonyms and the hyperbole and the sensationalism that came with this hurricane season, if you don't want to buy into that and you want to taper your expectations and call that a false alarm, at least realize we still have 2 quality months of the hurricane season left. So let's, like I said, a number of live streams ago before, if you don't want to look at the full 20 some odd named storms, you don't buy that, let's divide that by 2.5, and we still have at least another 5 to 7 storms to get through. And with as impactful as this hurricane season has been, 5 for 5 so far, you can guarantee that at least 3 or 4 of those 5 to 7, if you really want to lower the forecast that much for your own expectations and for your own comfort, 3 to 4 of those are more than likely going to hit someone. And that's me trying to be as realistic and as low-key and as honest with you guys as possible. If you don't believe we're going to get 15 more named storms, that's the forecast right now. In fact, they're sitting at 23 for the season, so that would be 18? No. That would be 7. No. Why am I not mathing all of a sudden? That would be about... I was right. 18 more named storms. 18 more named storms before the rest of the season is done. If you want to divide that by half to make it a little more realistic, we still have about 6 to 9 more named storms out there, and half of those are probably going to hit somebody. And that's, like I said, trying to be as honest and realistic as possible. We're not going to just end the season on Ernesto. That's impossible. We're not going to. We've said that before. We said Beryl wasn't going to do anything, and Beryl became a Cat 5. We were all voting Debbie off the island because it was just a dry as all could be tropical wave, and next thing you know, Florida got their hurricane. So if you want a more realistic outlook, I would recommend believing that, or putting your money into, we have another 6 to 9 named storms to go for this hurricane season, and half of those will likely be a threat to land. So we shall see. But anyways, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the live stream. Tyler Mack 954, thank you very, very much for the $5 donation. And I believe I saw someone else come through earlier. Let me scroll up in the chat. Rashad Baptiste, thank you for the $2 donation. You guys are awesome. I sincerely appreciate that so much, especially after my additional 24-hour hiatus. I like that Get Good sticker that was put there. That's awesome. But, all right, guys, that's it. Will there be more barrels in terms of track and intensity? Maybe not. We'll have to see intensity, but I definitely anticipate the track. The long track nature of barrel is still on the table for sure. And yes, Mr. Man JJ, I hate to say it, buddy, but the Windward Islands are still a target for sure. There's a lot of folks out there still on the table. Still on the table. I know it's a very wide swath, but again, I'll draw this just to give you guys a bit of a frame of reference. This was more or less the tracks from 2023, and if you look at our current run of 2024, this has been predominantly the track tendency. So we are definitely seeing a lot more of a westward bias with all of our tropical cyclones. So the Caribbean, particularly my Lesser Antilles, the Greater Antilles from Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, Hispaniola, up through the Turks and Caicos, Jamaica, Cayman Islands, all of our island friends out there, just everybody out there on an island needs to be paying attention. And then we can examine, obviously, what the United States potential impacts look like once we get our next invest, area of interest, or named storm on the table. Thank you guys all very much for tuning in today. It is Tuesday, August 20th, 8:49 Eastern Standard Time. We're going to go ahead and wrap up the live stream. Please consider clicking that subscribe button. If you haven't done so already, I would recommend turning your notifications on just in case, and so you don't miss another future update. I know sometimes YouTube is a little latent when they advertise notifying you guys of updates and content and everything and whatnot, but definitely consider turning that on. Nudge that like button for me. Leave me a comment if you have any questions, comments, or concerns down below with this video upon the conclusion of this live stream. I will make it a point to get back to you guys, and I always will and always do. So feel free to ask me anything you want. Ask me any questions. I'll definitely try to answer them to the best of my ability. Does Miami need to pay attention to this, sir? Absolutely. Abu Bakari, yes, definitely. You definitely need to be paying attention. Just watching. Just watching. We're not in an alarm state or kind of worried or anything like that. Nothing to be concerned about imminently, but there are things that just need watching. Brayton's Weather Channel, what do you think we could get think we could get some Irma and Jean and Andrew storms? Do you think that we could see Irma and Jean and Andrew type storms? The tracks, yes. Those storms specifically, not too sure, to be determined. We'd have to see exactly what our environment can support. They've been very wishy-washy. We've been very sensitive. The Atlantic is in a very emotional state right now, and so we're waiting to see. But do those tracks look doable? Yes. Absolutely. East, southeast coast Florida issue. We've already had a number of storms come through taking a path similar to not only Andrew, but also Irma, just coming a little further towards the west. If you remember, Debbie did something like that. Only difference between that and Irma is Irma came ashore a little bit sooner. So we've already kind of realized it to an extent. We've seen some of our old hurricane analogs verify. I mean, Barrow was a phenomenal example of, what was it, Emily? And what was the other name storm? What was the other named storm that occurred in 2005 that was comparable? Dennis, Hurricane Dennis. So we've already had a couple of different very, very intense analogs more or less match up to 2024. So we shall see. We'll definitely keep a close eye out. But thank you all very much once again. I hope you've had an awesome start to your week. We'll see you again likely on Thursday. Tomorrow I have some stuff I have to do after I get off work in regards to September. So there's a lot of moving pieces going on, but I'll definitely keep you updated. If anything does come up, if there's any breaking news, I will find a way to come live for you guys tomorrow, but plan for Thursday, and we'll see you again soon. But until next time, this is Weather Center Nazario signing out.